this is Kathy at Lost Valley Farm in Shiloh, which is near Micanopy. And today we're going to talk about wildflowers and collecting seeds for native wildflowers. And the first thing I want to say is I'm an amateur. Hadn't done anything like this till about a year ago. And we got with Terry Zinn, and he said they needed people to plant fields for Coreopsis for mitigation efforts with the Florida Department of Transportation, and could we do it? Okay, let's do it. So he gave us two crops to plant, which were the easiest, which is Coreopsis leavenworthii and Liatris baccata. First we cleared the land, and now this is not the way you usually plant Coreopsis. This is why you plant it this way for seeds, because it'll make it easier to collect the seeds. You put landscape cloth down and just run a 1 or 2 inch strip where you're going to put the seedlings. And then when the plant matures and the seeds start to fall, allegedly you can just go in and vacuum up the seeds very easily. Well, that sort of does work, and I'll talk about that more. But this is our second year, and amazingly, with the 2-month drought that we just had, the Coreopsis did not need to be watered. It's doing fine. Plant natives, they are very resilient. So once this matures, it's about this tall, and there is no landscape cloth in between that's visible. You have to go in and just like one person goes ahead and separates and another person comes in. The first time I saw the seeds start to drop, I got really excited, and I put on my bee protective equipment almost, thinking I was going to get stung because I know there were so many pollinators out here. And I got my little Dyson vacuum, and you know, I did it for about 10 seconds, filled up the vacuum, and I thought, well, this isn't the way you collect seeds. And then I also started wondering, is this really the seed? Well, two things happened. Bruce went up and got the tractor and the generator and just vacuumed up the seeds very easily. And then I started asking people, is this actually the seed? And I felt kind of dumb, but remember, I'm an amateur, so it's like, all right, I can ask dumb questions. So I went to some master gardeners I knew. I went to Melissa, and it was like, well, I think that's the seed. So that led me to doing something later, which I'm going to show you in our seed shed, just collecting seeds and seeing what they look like, because you got to know what they look like. My concept was Coreopsis is a tick seed, so the seed should look like a tick. These didn't look like a tick. The Lanceolata Coreopsis does look like a tick. So anyway, we collected seeds, and amazingly, because we didn't know what we were doing, we got 50 million seeds which were viable. There's 2 million in a pound, and we had to go up to Terry Zinn's place and have him send it through this big machine that separates out the seeds by weight. But that was great. So it was like, for a newbie, you shouldn't be afraid of planting wildflowers because you might have some success. They're not that hard. One of the fun things that was happening, we would come down this row, it was all filled in, and there would be a little depression right here. And we just thought, oh, there's just a sinking of the field right there. It wasn't until we cut down the Coreopsis later that we looked and we went, dang, there's been a gopher tortoise out here all along, and he's just been having food that's easy to get. And he's still there, and we're not going to touch him because you don't touch gopher tortoises these days, and we love them.
Does he eat your wildflowers, or is he just living in them?
No, he ate the Liatris baccata because they're looking for natives close to the ground and young, and so he did get some of the Liatris, but to my knowledge, he didn't get the Coreopsis. One thing we were concerned about, there's always deer in this field when we wake up in the morning. But this is a tip from Melissa. We got these motion-activated sensors that when the deer come in, first of all, we took pictures at night to know that it really was the deer coming in. And this will send a motion-activated 10-second spray of water. We had to do that 1 or 2 nights. The deer never came back.
Wow.
We have one at each corner. And this is a 55-foot by 55 plot. So we didn't have to put up an electric fence or anything like that.
Yeah.
I hope you can hear the sandhill cranes in the back.
I can, they're so lovely.
And I go through, and because it was only a 1 or 2 inch section, there wasn't that much weeding. One of the things that's been coming up a lot is the Canadian TOADFLAX, but that's a native that Florida Wildflower Foundation even sells seeds for. You can't see it right here. It gets that beautiful blue on it. So, you know, if we're trying to plant natives, I'm not really trying so much to pull up other natives. I'm glad that they're there. We do get some sitta, which is impossible to pull up, and we do get a lot of cudweed. But other than that, the rows are pretty good. So I'm going to take you over to show you something unusual I found the other day. And I knew when Melissa was coming out, she wouldn't have any hesitation of going right in there and opening this unusual thing up.
Nope, I barely had to be asked.
So I saw this on the Coreopsis, and I thought, is it a worm? I've kind of learned not to always think something unusual looking is bad. I asked Terry Zinn what he thought it was, and he thought it was a gall for spiders, and that the Coreopsis leaves just kind of form a woody structure around the eggs of the spider. Another guy from UF Entomology, which you can't take your specimens over there right now, but he guessed maybe it was a spider or a psyllid. But this leads me to the thing, go out in your fields every day and look at what you have. Even if you think nothing has changed, something has changed, and if you're checking every day, you're going to spot trouble before it really gets big, and you're just going to be surprised at what you see. So even if you've done something for years, it's a good idea. So we planted mostly Coreopsis leavenworthii, and then we did 2 rows of Liatris spicata. It's a monocot, and when it was first coming up, I thought it was a grass, and I pulled some out mistakenly, and the gopher tortoise ate some mistakenly. And nothing was coming up until like around August, so I thought, well, we did well on the Coreopsis, but not on the Liatris. Well, about August, it starts sending up these shoots. By October, some of them were 10 feet tall. So I would walk down this row in the morning and talk about your happy place. That was it. And the amount of butterflies and pollinators that were on the Liatris was spectacular. And if you haven't fallen in love with wildflowers before you see a Liatris spicata that's 10 feet tall, you will do it then. So I came down here the other morning to see if anything was coming up. Now remember, they don't really come up until September, blossom in October. But I came over here. Of course, we just cut these down to about 5 inches when they were done. And I found one Liatris coming up like this. And it's actually got some blossoms on it.
Yeah.
Now that little thing will start in August, and around September, October, it will have grown and grown and grown. And in the wild, they don't always get to 10 feet, but this is kind of a protected, simple area where they can just grow undisturbed. You don't vacuum the seeds to Liatris spicata. You just wait until the top dries out, cut them at the bottom, turn them over in a bag, pull them off. Our neighbor at Mockernut Hill, Linda Duver, had us go over, I think it was almost early November, and she had some Liatris which she was going to give to Grow Hub in the seed library. She had Liatris tenuifolia, and it was so dry, if we hadn't gone over that day, a plovery would have blown away. So it wasn't even as hard as cutting it off at the bottom and turning it upside down. We just took a paper bag and went shh, 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 and the bag was full of seeds in less than an hour.
Wow.
So there's all different types of Liatris, and there are many, many varieties of Coreopsis that are native to Florida. But one thing about the seeds, I told you how many Coreopsis seeds we got that were viable. We had bags of Liatris spicata seeds. We took them up to Terry. He thought they looked good. Then after a few weeks, he sent them through his machine, which separates out things by weight. About 2% were viable of the Liatris spicata seeds.
Wow.
All the North Florida growers of Liatris spicata had the same experience. We had a drought in September and October, and he said he thought that was why Liatris didn't set seed. So he suggested this year to not harvest them as soon as we did, and to water them. And it's kind of unusual to get a direction to water natives after they've been established, but we're going to try that this year. So we had success with that. We really had success with Liatris because they were so beautiful, but we didn't have success with the Liatris spicata seeds. Okay, by the way, my partner Bruce does 90% of the work out here, so don't think I'm doing this all by myself. Before we go up to the seed shack, I want to just show you that I did plant some Asclepias incarnata and 2 rows of Asclepias tuberosa, and 1 row of Liatris tenuifolia. Now, amazingly enough, the aphids haven't gotten to them yet, the caterpillars haven't gotten to them yet. You usually don't plant milkweeds in a row like this, but remember, we're doing things for seed. So I did get 2 rose milkweeds from the Florida History Museum plant sale last year. Planted them up there. They were totally covered with aphids. I tried to get rid of them, but when it came to the pod getting ready to release its seeds, I would watch it every day, and when it got as dry as I thought it could be without opening up and spreading the seeds, I got the seeds out, I planted them, and all those came up. So if you're doing it to save seeds, I don't know, I'm not worried too much about the aphids, but we'll see how far they get with the butterflies. It's sort of like your first year farming, especially vegetable farming. You think, well, this isn't so hard, I'm doing pretty good, and it's only because the weeds and the bugs haven't found you yet. By the second year they found you, and it can get a lot more difficult. Not always. But I'll talk about the tuberosa too, because everybody said you can't transplant tuberosa. I don't know if ours are going to do well, and some of them have died, but we're doing a minor drip irrigation on them because tuberosa do not need to be overwatered, and we'll see if we get the seeds. And while we're on it, I want to talk about getting seeds. We get all of ours from the Florida Wildflower Foundation. Love supporting that organization. And we didn't have wildflowers, not many, that we could get our own seeds from. And so that's where we got all our seeds, because they're Florida eco-friendly seeds. By the end of the time they were dispensing seeds before the COVID thing happened, the tuberosa seeds were $250. I counted them one time in a packet for $3. The incarnata seeds were 16 cents a piece. So they were much rarer, much more in demand, and I hope we get hundreds of rose milkweed seeds for the local seed library. Okay, so this is our little gnome house. No, it's actually our seed shack. This was an old office, but it's a perfect place to dry seeds. We keep the humidity pretty low, under 35% most of the time. And we have big racks which we dry the coreopsis on and pump them up from the bottom like this to get some of the dirt and the sand out. You never get them completely clean, but when you're doing it for the Florida Wildflower Foundation, you want to have them as clean as possible. With the Liatris, it's very easy to just take them off the stems. Well, because I had asked earlier, what does the coreopsis seed look like, and I didn't get clear answers, and I tried to find online sources for telling me what wildflower seeds look like. And to tell you the truth, they're so small, it'd be hard to make a really good video or something of what the wildflower seeds really look like. I made a display for myself because my purpose is to collect wildflower seeds. So I want to know what I'm looking for when some of ours start to bloom next year and seed, and then I'm going to know what part of it is actually the seed. So just taking a few, the coral bean is one of the bigger seeds. And it's one of the ones that you have to nick in order to get it to come out. The way I nick it is I just get fingernail clippers and I just nick the side of the seed until you see white, until you see the whites of the seed eyes, with a lot of the ones that have a hard shell. So we collect coral bean from our seeds. Here's 3 different types of Liatris. Now when I took our Liatris seeds up to Terry's Inn, I thought they were pretty clean. I'm not sure how much you can see of the little parachute there.
Pretty decent.
Well, he took these Liatris seeds, even though we found out later they weren't viable, and he spread them on a surface, and he got a blowtorch out, and he blowtorched them for 5 seconds.
What's the purpose of that?
To take this little parachute thing off, and so just the seed can be put in packets, and just the seed will touch the ground. You want to have a firm contact with the ground with your seeds. I never thought of a blowtorch as a seed cleaning machine, but then he's the expert, so.
Yep.
Okay, something like powder puff mimosa, Mimosa strigolosa, it's not as big a seed as a coral bean, so it doesn't really need to be nicked like by fingernail clippers, or some people don't do that kind of nicking. They soak things overnight in hot water. That's what Claudia Larson at Micanopy Wildflowers does. But what you do is you just get a piece of sandpaper and put the seeds in and just rub them like nature would naturally do. If something were sitting in the field for 3 months, it would just be tossed around a little bit and a little bit of the shell would be scratched open. So when I first started planting some seeds, I didn't do that with some hard seeds and they didn't germinate. The other big thing about preparing seeds is a lot of people say you have to cold stratify your seeds. That's what nature would do. They would fall in October and November. They would be on the ground in the cold for a few months. When I first got like the Asclepias tuberosa, I put them in the refrigerator for 4 weeks. That's the only time they didn't germinate. So it's one of those things. If you read too much online, you won't do anything because you're going to hear conflicting information. At some point, you just got to jump in there and plant some stuff and see if it works. Claudia Larson at Micanopy Wildflowers, I just saw her a couple weeks ago. Beautiful place, no greenhouse, thousands of wildflowers. She doesn't get any seeds from somebody else, has things on her property where she gets her own seeds. She cold stratifies everything. So I'm not an expert on that, but we just didn't cold stratify anything after that one time. So a few other things. Here's the swamp milkweed. Now, when I pulled it off, it still had all the silk on it. I didn't clean that seed and everything came up. So, you know, sometimes they say you really have to clean your seeds. It's so beautiful.
It is.
Here's the tuberosa seeds, which you just lay on the top. And I always thought you push seeds into the soil. A lot of things need sun to germinate, so you don't push them into the soil. Here's the 2 types of coreopsis. I'm going to put one on my finger because I told you I didn't know the difference between Coreopsis leavenworthii.
They're so fun.
So
it's like
tiny.
Dust particles.
And then what I was expecting more, the Coreopsis leavenworthii, which does look more like a tick.
Sure does.
And that's what it's called, tick seed. And there are, I think, at least 10 more types of native Coreopsis in Florida. So that's another reason why I started making this tray, because it's like, I'm not sure about all this stuff. Some of the seeds I harvested from our land. Once you get into seeds, it's kind of a joke with Bruce and I. We used to take walks in the woods, and he would stop to photograph everything, and I'd be standing there. Now, I see something new, and I'm the one trying to identify it, and he's the one standing there. So our walks are kind of more interrupted now in a beautiful way. This was the climbing hemp vine, which we have all over here, which I never knew we have. Some people would call it a weed. It has a beautiful white bloom on it. This is probably, with the liatris, the thing that got me into seeds more than ever. I was walking down one of the pastures out here and I saw the seed head and I just stopped. I was like, is that even real? Is that the end of a rope? What is that? And that was the seed head of CLEMATIS reticulata. It made me cry. It was so beautiful. I just couldn't believe it. Well, here's some of the seeds from that hairy seed head. I tried to get them to grow and I couldn't, but they're still my absolute favorite.
They are gorgeous. They remind me of something from a Dr. Seuss book. Maybe.
Yeah, I forget which one that is, but a lot of people say that. So we have a lot of beautyberry growing out here, so I thought, well, how do you get beautyberry seeds? Each of the druplets has 2 seeds in them. And so I collected them because they're right here. They didn't germinate, I think because they're pretty hard, even though they're small. Another favorite of ours out here is blue curl, Trichostema dichotomum. I'm trying to learn the botanical names. This is only about a 1/2 inch flower. You could walk by it in the woods and never see it unless you're really looking. It's spectacular. This is forked blue curl. It's a native, and I'll show you some that are dried out up by the greenhouse because they're all over and they self-seed. So that's a wonderful one too. It looks like a little orchid or something.
It's gorgeous.
Okay, here's another one of my favorites. Can you tell I have a lot of favorites? Mm-hmm. The CANNA FLACCIDA. This is actually a small seed of the CANNA FLACCIDA. I read recently that the Indians used to use these in their rattles. They'd find a dried out turtle shell and put the CANNA in there to make the rattle because they're so big and they're so hard. I could not nick these with fingernail clippers. Bruce had to get the drill out and put the little sand thing on it and nick these seeds. And you can see he nicked them because that's the little white part on there.
Oh.
So those are ready to plant. You want to go until you see the white part of the seed, and it will be much more likely to germinate.
Do you think some of these seeds might just have dormancy built in naturally?
Right,
until
and
they're ready
you
to
know,
go?
with the weather changing as much as it is, I'm not sure you can follow the old rules of when to plant seeds and when not. That's why I say you might read so much you'll get confused and not do anything. Just try some stuff and plant more than you think, because some things are just not going to come up. Just recently, like 2 days ago, I went out to the woods here and I saw AMORPHA FRUTICOSA, which is false indigo, and I thought, I bet I could save the seed from that. I don't know how to do it yet, but I'm going to try. It's beautiful when it's in bloom.
Yes.
Then another one I got is the snow square stem, and I know this is the seed head. I know a little bit, and I wasn't sure which part was the seed. So I'm starting to learn, oh, it's that part that feels like something. Yeah. It's kind of triangular. You know there's something in there. And a few months ago when I didn't know what the seed was, because some of the liatris actually looks like some of the chaff in this. So I was like, well, which part is the seed? I planted some and some of them came up. So I knew I was close, but I wasn't sure. But now, and I asked Claudia Larson, this is the seed, right? She said, yeah, you can feel it. So there's a lot of seeds around. You don't want to take seeds if you don't ask permission from the owner. You don't want to take the last seeds that are planted somewhere, but there's so many seeds that you can get just around this area. And we're in Shiloh, which is out in the country near Micanopy.
I think after you've gotten the hang of seeing where different plants have their seeds and what they're like, it kind of becomes intuitive, but it's fun. Like, you got to figure it out.
When I was new, I wouldn't even have known any indication, and now I'm starting to learn.
So Kathy, how do you keep it dry in here?
We have a dehumidifier right here.
Ah.
And you know, with our summers, we absolutely need it.
Does it run constantly?
Not constantly, but it fills up with water and Bruce has to empty it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Another part of seeds, if you're doing them, is the paperwork. We have planted a lot of different varieties, and I just put down when we planted them, how they did they go to Grow Hub, where did the seed come from, did I pick them, did I get them from the seed library, did I get them from Florida Wildflower Foundation, so that next year I'll know maybe a little bit better than I did this year which seeds that I can grow pretty easily, which ones needed sun more, and things like that. It's probably everybody's least favorite thing to do, but you got to do some paperwork on your farm stuff.
Sure, and it's actually really interesting because you think you'll remember certain things, but the notes you take actually tell you what happened.
And trying to learn the botanical names, I'm going to mess things up anyway, and so just having them written there and looking at them all the time helps me start to remember them. Okay, so we're walking up to the greenhouse, but I wanted to stop first because there's some, it's a version of St. John's wort. It's a HYPERICUM at St. Michael's Cross, and when I walk by it, sure does look like some seeds are going to be ready here. This almost looks like a tuberosa seed, to tell you the truth. It's two little things clasping onto something, and I imagine there's a seed head in there. But when I go to get it right now, it doesn't seem like there's anything dry enough. But I'm going to keep my eye on this because that would be lovely to plant this native. And then right over here, I showed you the blue curl seeds. This is the dried out seed head. And the blue curl seeds just sit right in these little cups. Okay, so welcome to our greenhouse, which we probably would have built a little differently if we had known about sun and everything, how it beats down on plastic. And we have ordered a shade cloth, but with all the manufacturing stopping lately, we haven't gotten it. It's been over a month, so we're not sure when it's going to come. We've had to modify and put screen here and put 2 fans there, and it still gets rather hot. But on the other hand, we've gotten a lot of good growth in this greenhouse. So here's some phlox, but it's the phlox Drummond, which is not native. I thought it was native because it was on the Florida Wildflower Foundation, but not everything on there is native. But we'll definitely send these over to Grow Hub. We're starting some roselle, so those are two things that aren't native. Here's some goldenrod from our local seed library. A lot of it has been pulled out and planted already. Here's some sand squares, which do really well in the sun. It can get as hot as it wants in here, and they'll do well. And they actually are in a square shape, which is unusual in nature. Here's some of those hard black canna beans coming up. And I think they're going to be so beautiful. Oh, I wish we'd gotten that little drop of water on there. Sometimes when you're planting things, you have to just pay attention to what's happening. This penstemon was growing this way really well and not here, so I turned it around and now it's doing well there. So growing in bulk, you have to pay attention to things. And then here's all our roseweed milkweed. A lot of it out here has already been replanted, and this is our most recent planting. And the reason why this is doing so much better than some things that have been planted before, I put it on a tray and kept the feet wet for the first week. And that white tuber going down was coming out the bottom, and there was much better production. This is called swamp milkweed, so it made sense to me to put it in something like a swamp. When I repotted some of the swamp milkweed, I'm also keeping the bottom wet. And I'm just amazed, cross my fingers, no aphids yet. The monarchs haven't found us. Now, here's the tuberosa. Oh, and I want to talk about my favorite gardening tool. You just can't beat it. I know I live with a carpenter and I'm much more likely to like this, but this just digs everything out.
It's a beautiful tool.
You can put something here to say I'm only going to go down this deep. I'm going to go down and try to find the tuberosa root, which I told you can't disturb the root. It's this white, thick root that you really want to protect, and it gets really thick. I've seen them when they're really thick. The other thing is, when you have big trays, notice what's happening. Why did these all dry up and these didn't? Well, my theory is they're on the end and this is drier, and so maybe they needed more water. That kind of bears out too, because a lot of things that we've already pulled up, the one next to it dries out. So you kind of have to be your own detective. I'm not totally sure that was the reason. I did know when we were planting milkweed to get very deep wells, because you really want to have those roots go down pretty well. And I couldn't find any, so we ordered from this company. And these are 5-inch wells for all the Asclepias. One thing I did learn, I do not like these kind of trays, which are very shallow.
They're the worst.
They dry out in any kind of greenhouse. The roots might not be big enough to transplant them even into 4-inch pots. And I did learn it's better to put things in 4-inch pots and not go straight from potting in small cells to a gallon pot. The main reason, it seemed like it would save a step to me, but the water runs down in a different way in a gallon pot, and so you want to go from this to a 4-inch pot and then to a gallon pot if you're going to sell them at some point. And then because the Florida Wildflower Foundation sells grasses, I thought, I don't know much about planting grasses, let's try some native grasses. This is the lopsided Indian grass, the yellow top, and this is the purple lovegrass. When I first planted some grass seeds, I overseeded so much it was ridiculous. When they got to Grow Hub, they had to divide each little one into 4 different pots. So I'm just very new at growing grasses, but it's kind of fun to try.
So this is like 20 or 30 seeds in here?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a mistake of a lot of beginning seeders. let's just take those yellow seeds and throw them in there, and they're so small, how could you ever individualize them anyway? And then you end up thinning, and then you decide, I don't think I'm going to thin. Nature's going to take care of it. It's one of those things you go back and forth on. And then just one last thing this morning. We're taking some of the things which we were growing for Grow Hub to make a better native section out there. And they're not selling so well with the problems in the world. So I'm going to just start planting for seeds. So I wouldn't naturally plant a wildflower garden. Here's the white indigo, here's the blanket flower. But because I'm trying to identify them, which will be easier because I have them in little containers down there. So we have some more blue curl here. And then we have a lovely garden of Coreopsis lanceolata, where the Coreopsis leavenworthii had a dark center. This one has a light center. And in the sun right now, I think it's the hackberry butterflies that come, and they kind of go underneath so you don't know there's so many there. And you put the water on them and they're just like, whew, it's so beautiful. So I started to plant some of the things from the greenhouse out here. I realized I was going to shove everything into too small a space. So Bruce made me a lovely counter garden where I've already planted some things, and we finally got that inch of rain, so that really helped. And so I'm just going to go crazy for wildflowers, because in these days, it's a hopeful thing to do. And we all need a lot of hope. So plant some wildflower seeds.